Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 216 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite a few big cats, but done by Sky Polaris. Always making the very interesting mods about different populations and things. Gives us an opportunity to talk about something different. And we've also got a couple crocodilians, also done by Sky Polaris. And we've got a really cool eagle, as you see at the end as well. And we've got an extinct pigeon to talk about too. We're going to be starting off today. This is done by Sky Polaris. We have got here the Bornean crocodile, as you can kind of see here. I don't know if that's probably the best look. Let's see the female over here. Here we go. So this is the Bornean crocodile. So Crocodilus raminus, or the Bornean crocodile, these guys are considered quite an emmetic species of freshwater crocodile that are only found in the island of Borneo. And I say kind of enigmatic because its taxonomy is actually rather confusing. It's not actually sure whether this is an actual species. So we don't know exactly where it fits in the tree of life, you could say. It has been considered by some authors to be synonymous with Crocodilus paurosus, or the saltwater crocodile. But after redistriction in 1990 and 1992, actually that presents a lot of evidence of it actually being its own species. And based on its external morphology and its skull, it actually is quite similar to the New Guinea crocodile. But we don't know exactly what's going on there. Unfortunately, I think there could be a valid argument if it's an island endemic. New Guinea crocodiles exist. Why can't a Borneo one exist? So I think it's just the case of not being enough people really there to study. Maybe genetics would really help clear this up. Maybe it is genetically like a population of salties that evolved to be more freshwater adapted for Borneo. There's taxonomy being taxonomy. It's just one of those things we don't know that much about it. So we'll have a look at the Zoopedia and see what other information we can get. Body over what's not that I not really encountered. Difficult to assess due to the habitat and then all that stuff. Alright. Taxonomic status of the Bornean crocodile is controversial. Some consider it as a species or a population of the widespread crocodile. Saltwater crocodile lived in fresh water, living camouflage. Not considered sign reclusive, which is very interesting. Yeah, not too different from other crocodiles. So yeah, very interesting there. Another good one by Sky Polaris. And this next one's a remaster. I'm not going to go too much into detail with it because I've already covered it before, and not too long ago. So we've got here the remaster of the... Is this a baby? No, it's the adult. So this is a remake of the False Gharial. So the False Gharial, also known as Tomistoma, these guys are a freshwater crocodilian in the family Grabalidae. That is found across, Southeast Asia. And they are sadly actually considered endangered. There's believed to be between 2,500 to 10,000 individuals left in the world. So yeah, they've got a very slender snout, very similar to the gharial, but they're not that closely related to gharial. They're separated by quite a bit of time, but they are still their closest relative. But yeah, they have one of the slimmest snouts, and they're actually comparable to that of the slender-snouted and freshwater crocodiles. But they're only the gharial's one is quite a bit slimmer. The original one just made it look like, kind of a funky gharial, but they actually tried to make it a little bit more distinct this time with the colours and everything. They get to be quite a decent size. Mature males of captivity can weigh up to about 210 kilograms. That have been observed, and 210 kilograms at about just under 4 meters long. They also have the largest skull out of any crocodilian, which is quite interesting as well. And some larger measurements have been observed potentially. There would have been between 2.9 to 4.05 meters or 13 feet long, and weighing between 79 and 225 kilograms is their general range in terms of size. So Tomistoma is the only living, this kind of genus, Tomistoma schedulei, has got quite a few extinct members to it. Gharials actually used to be quite diverse. There was like marine ones and all these ones, but really the only living members today is the gharial or Gravialis. and the Tomistoma, a false gharial that is around today. And there was a few extinct species that we actually know about, which is quite interesting. See, these guys live in Southeast Asia. They live in like swamp forests and peat swamps. They are locally extinct in Thailand and Java, though, so hopefully they get more of them. They have a diet that is very generalist. They were thought to be like gharials and have a very restricted diet to small vertebrates, but they seem to actually be a bit more generalist than we assumed. And they'll eat like monkeys and macaques and deer and reptiles, and they've even been reported eating a cow, so quite a bit of variety there. In terms of reproduction, it's very similar to other crocodilians. They'll make a mound and lay a bunch of eggs in them, and then the female will guard them. And actually, these guys appear to make the largest eggs out of any crocodilian alive, so it's very interesting there. They attain sexual maturity at about 2.5 to 3 meters long, which is quite large compared to other crocodilian species. And in terms of threats, they face all the kind of same threats most other crocodilians face. There's lots of threats due to habitat destruction, with a lot of their habitats getting drained and getting converted to oil plantations. They're also hunted for their skin and meat, another big issue. And also because their population's so isolated, they could be at risk of genetic isolation and become inbred. But luckily, there is some efforts to try and help them. There are reports of some populations coming back in Indonesia, slight recovery, and education to help teach people how to deal with these crocodiles and things like that. So yeah, really, really cool. Let's see if we can spot a little baby, because there must be a little baby in here. I remember a call them being a little baby. There they are. Very, very cute little goobers. Anyway, we are going to carry on. So this was also done by Sky Polaris. Sky Polaris also did the next one. So this is here, the Indo-Chinese tiger. So we had the leopard last time, and now we've got the tiger. Let's have a look at you guys. So the Indo-Chinese tiger is a population of Panthera tigris, or the mainland tiger, that is native to Southeast Asia, and they live in Myanmar and in Thailand. In 2011, the population was thought to be about 350 individuals, including 85 in Myanmar and 20 in Vietnam, with the largest population surviving in Thailand, with about 252 or 889 between 2009 and 2014. So the original scientific name for these guys, so were described as their own subspecies, was Panthera tigris coburti, and was provided by the Vatashi Majak in 1968, based on its coloration, markings, and skin dimensions, and was named to honor Jim Corbett. But in 2017, the big cat classification task force revived a lot of the taxonomy for these guys and kind of lumped them into the kind of mainland subspecies of tiger. And whether you agree with that is it's taxonomy being taxonomy, but there is some evidence suggests that they may have been, these guys could be distinct from those mainland populations. So in terms of characteristics, they are generally darker than most other species of tiger, or subspecies of tiger, with more narrow and simple stripes, and it also has a smaller skull. 11 were measured and had 21 to 31 stripes, and in body size they are smaller than Bengal and Siberian tigers, with males ranging between 255 to 285 centimeters, or about 100 to 112 inches in length, and weigh between 150 to 195 kilograms, or between 331 to 430 pounds. And females range between 230 to 255, or 91 to 100 inches, and weigh between 100 and 130 kilograms, or 220 to 290 pounds. So in terms of the habitat, they are distributed in Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand, so very, very wide range. The historical range also included Vietnam, southern China, and Cambodia. And based on phylogenetic studies looking about their range, the historical northwestern distribution of the Indo-Chinese tiger was up into the Barapunapha Basin and the Chittagong Hill Tracts that bordered the range of the Bengal tiger population. And there has been surveys looking around, starting to see where these guys are found. They confirmed their presence in Hunterwong Valley in the Tenasserim Hills as well. More than half of the population, though, lives in the Western Forest Complex in Thailand, where they have a habitat mostly of tropical and subtropical moist broadleaf forest. So they've been quite well recorded in there. There's been 14 documented tigers in Laos. In eastern Cambodia, they are considered functionally extinct, and there is talk of potentially trying to help them there. And throughout the 1960s, they actually were reported throughout the mountains of Vietnam, but they were living in highly fragmented areas. But they're still present. They were still present in 14 protected areas in 1990, but none have been recorded in the country since 1997, likely due to poaching, which is really, really sad. Which is, of course, really, really sad. And they did used to live in China. They used to live in the Yunnan province and the Meidong County, but which do not survive today. And today they only really live in Thailand and Myanmar. So hopefully there's some efforts to bring them back to, to areas where they used to live. Anyway, so in terms of their behavior and ecology, they tend to live in quite wide ranges. Females have about a mean honing range of about 70 to 33 kilometers, or between 27 to 28 square miles, and males have a much bigger one, between 267 and 92 square kilometers, or between 103 and 35 square miles. And looking into surveys into what they eat, their sort of prey, they have identified 11 species, part of 150 different kills. They ranged in size from 3 kilograms to 287 kilograms, or between 6.6 to 632 pounds. The typical prey range is kind of sandbar deer, bartang, gar, and wild boar, but there have been also the remains of Asian elephant calves, hogbatches, old wood porcupines, muntjacs, seros, pangolins, and langur species have been identified as these issues as well as these kills. And the main issue for the Indo-Chinese tiger has plagued the rest of the populations of tigers. They have been poached quite heavily by the illegal wildlife trade for illegal traditional Chinese medicines, like that kind of stuff as well. South Korea has imported about 600 kilograms of tiger bones from Thailand and 2,415 from China. So they all kind of used for aphrodisiacs and things like that. So they're kind of believed to be those kind of things. And it's sad that tigers are dying just for this, voodoo stuff, to be completely honest. But yeah, luckily there is some efforts to help them, so they are considered legal to hunt them, and in a lot of places it is banned to sell them for medicine. But that obviously doesn't stop the super rich. Patrolling of these sanctuaries is also appears to help poaching as they introduce them. They've also reduced poaching because there's people patrolling these sanctuaries and stuff, and indicating that some populations are actually recovering quite well. But they're still considered in Thailand and Laos considered endangered subspecies or endangered population, and they're also considered critically endangered in Vietnam and Myanmar. But in captivity, they are by far the least represented of the tigers, and they're not part of a coordinated breeding program. And out of the 105 captive tigers in 14 countries, only about 14 were recognized to be Indo-Chinese tigers. So they're not very well represented in captivity. But yeah, really, really cool animal regardless. Nice to see some more mods going on. Alright, so next up we have got... Let's have a look at the next up. The Sri Lankan tiger. Or lion, I mean. So this is the Sri Lankan lion, done by Sky Polaris as well. Let's have a good look here. So this is given the subspecies name Panthera leo shinhaliensis. So these guys are actually considered an extinct subspecies of lion. This was found in Sri Lanka and is believed to have become extinct prior to the arrival of humans about 37,000 years ago. And this was first found in 1938 with paleontologist Palas Dirangala finding this new subspecies based on a single left lower carnassial as one of the molars, and this tooth was extracted from deposits in the Kurawita, and the holotype and a damaged right lower canine from the same location. And it was further described but named only as Panthera leo, as in a study of felids in 2005, talking about this guy. So it was said to be narrower and more elongate, but otherwise little information was given to how you could distinguish the subspecies from other lion populations, and distinguish it only from the teeth of tigers by its larger size, which is a bit weird because, tigers can get bigger than lions, but whatever. And, they didn't do too much in describing it, but the Sri Lankan lion, it makes complete sense that lions would be living in Sri Lanka. because the range that lions have today, which are mainly African, is not quite what it used to be. You know, you had your um, your cave lions and American lions, but the modern lion did used to live in Asia, and we has the Asiatic lion population, and they probably would have lived right up until they didn't live in the little area, the Gujarat that they live now. They would have lived all across India and parts of Southeast Asia that were more open to them. So it's very likely they would have had that. And Sri Lanka's only just a little bit off the mainland. And you've got to remember as well, this would have been part of when the world was a little bit cooler than today and sea levels were a lot lower. It was a lot easier for them to just walk to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka would have probably been a part of the mainland. Even today, it's still considered very close to the mainland, so it would be very easy for a lion at the time to walk through. But yeah, really, really cool. Nice other animal to look at. And you can see this really beautiful female here and these cute little cubs. Don't you love these cute little cubs? Very, very cute. All right, speaking of more lions, next up we've got the European lion. So this is not even a subspecies. This is kind of like just a population that we're going to be talking about here. So this is the history. We're going to talk about the history of lions in Europe. So we're going to be starting from the Pleistocene. So the Pleistocene, from about 2 million years ago, there was the species, the fossil lion or Panthera fossilaris, and the cave lion, which lived throughout most of Europe during the Pleistocene, when the world was a lot cooler. But the modern lion managed to reach, as you know, the declining numbers of cave lions and fossil lions, with the extinction of a lot of those big megafaunal animals, you know, like the mammoths and stuff. The modern lion actually managed to get into southern parts of Europe during the Holocene. So the earliest records of a modern lion in Europe date to about 8,000 years ago, or 6,000 years ago. And there is a Neolithic lion found about in the Atlantic period between Bulgaria that's about 6,000 years old. And Greece lions believed to first appear about 6,000 years ago. And yeah, so that makes sense that, you know, as these lions, these cave lions that would have been competition for the modern lions went extinct, they would have moved up north into suitable habitats. So, in terms of where these lions used to live, in southeast Europe, the modern lion used to live across a lot of the Balkan Peninsula, as well into Hungary and Ukraine during the Neolithic. It survived in Bulgaria until the 3rd or 3rd century, and about 1000 BC, it became extinct in Peloponnese. It also disappeared from Macedonia in the 1st century and Western Thrace in the 2nd century AD. Some authors have actually suggested that even these guys may have lived in Ukraine as far as late as the High Middle Ages, as there's reports of them as a fierce beast there. But some records actually potentially also suggest that Panthera leo may have also been recorded from the early Holocene of the northern Iberian Peninsula and northern Italy, which kind of makes sense for them as well. Though these fossils are poorly dated, and it is actually impossible from their morphology because they're quite fragmentary and poorly dated. They could potentially just be cave lions. We don't know if they're actually cave lions or modern lions. But in Transcaucasia, they were present until the 10th century, and at its peak, this historic range, it covered pretty much all the plains and foothills of East Transcaucasia. So would have lived with a lot of species that, you know, would have considered today around, you know, Europeans. So lived with wild asses and, you know, aurochs and wisent. So would have lived with those kind of animals and lived up in Turkey as well. And they were, of course, cave lions were also featured a lot in cave paintings and things, but they were featured a lot and also in ancient Greek mythology, and they were treated a lot because they did live in Greece and, you know, places like that at the time, so there were lions around there. So they would have been often, you know, portrayed by them and used in, you know, like the Trojan War, you know, the Roman Empire. They would have potentially used them for fighting as well. But they believe that these lions would have kind of died out around the 5th century AD, or, you know, within the last few thousand years, because of, you know, people hunting them mercilessly, because people don't like living with large predators, interestingly. But yeah, Another interesting mod. It'd be interesting to see how these lions change, because they probably wouldn't look too different. They would probably look quite similar to your Asiatic lions, that they may not have had that huge mane. But yeah, really, really cool. And another cute little cub. How can you not love a cute little cub? But yeah, really did an awesome job with this one. So next up, we covered all these guys. So all these guys were done by Sky Polaris. Did a really good job. Next up, we've got by Monsoon. You know, I always love a good Monsoon mod. We've got the Consumel Pigeon. So let's have a look at these funky guys. There's an elderly one. Funky guy. So this is the Consumel. It's also known as the Solomon Crested Pigeon, or the Solomon Islands Crowned Pigeon. So these are an extinct species of bird in the dudgeon and pigeon and dove family, not pigeon and dove. My words. They were endemic to the island of Console in, I think, Consumel, in the Solomon Islands as well, but there was unstated reports they may have lived on other islands. And sadly, the last confirmed sighting of them was in 1904, which is sad as well. But in taxonomy, they were first described by Walter Rothschild in 1904, based on 6 skins of 3 males and 3 females, and an egg collected by Albert Stuart Meek in earlier that year. So they were then placed in the monotypic genus Microgora, which kind of means micro, so small, and gora, which means the New Guinean Aboriginal word for the similar crested crown pigeons that lived in, other areas. Rothschild named the species after Meek and called it Meekai. Though the relationships, it's unclear to what it was related to. It actually is suggested that these guys would have been closest related to the thick-billed ground pigeon of Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, as it has a similar plumage. But it also been suggested that the Conseil pigeon, there was a link between the thick-billed ground pigeon and the crown pigeons. However, the sources argue that it may not have been closely related, and their crest was actually quite different. Though based on behavioural and morphological evidence, they actually suggest that the Conseil pigeon should be placed in the Goruridae subfamily, along with the Gora pigeons, the dodo, the Rodriguez solitaria, and all these guys, and they didn't have any subspecies. But today, what is left of this species is only about 5 skins and a partial skeleton kept in the American Museum of Natural History, with a single skin and egg kept in the National History Museum in Tuareg. They're also known as the Solomon Crowned Pigeon, the Solomon Crested Pigeon, Meek's Ground Pigeon, and things like that. But the indigenous people call them the Kumukupeka or Kulukulua, who say that, or basically that translates literally to the pigeon belong to the ground, or the pigeon belonging to the ground. And I don't know what's going on. I believe these guys can actually climb, and I haven't seen any of them actually really climb yet, so I'm interested to see how that happens, because I know... Oh, wait, no, there is one up there. There it is. So they can climb. I'll have a look at you, because you're being funny. Anyway, so the Kunsel pigeon was about 31 centimeters long, and the wing of the male was about 195 to 197 millimeters, or about 7.7, 7.8 inches. Had a tail about 100 to 105 millimeters, or about 4 inches as well. And adults of both sexes typically had a blue-grey overall and a buffy orange belly, as you can see there. And the pigeon has this quite distinctive long crest. As you see, it's got quite a hairy texture to it as well. And this crest is like the crown was kind of a salty blue and emerged from the hind crown. And though many artists have speculated, it's unknown if it's held its crest in life as Meek notes like this, or would have been flat based on Meek specimens. And though other artists have presented it spread and scraggly like those of crown pigeons. So how it's presented in life is sadly going to probably be one of those mysteries, because we really just don't know much about these pigeons, which is pretty sad actually, because, they went extinct before there was serious science done on them. On the bird's forehead, they were naked, and they had a pale chalky blue frontal shield, as you can kind of see here. This was surrounded by velvety kind of black feathers that extended to the base of the bill, to the area just below the front of the eye, and the area had a pinkish wash. And a little note about the crest, while I'm on it, there's actually suggested that the crest may have been flattened as people prepared them, which is interesting. So that might just have been how it happened when they were preparing the specimens. Back on topic. The area of the eye was a pinkish wash. in and the black velvety feathers, and the neck was kind of a slaty blue that transitioned to a brownish grey breast, as you can kind of see there, a bit of a transition there. The abdomen and undertail coverts are rich orange, and the undertail was a blackish grey. The black has transitioned to a browner rump, so you can see it goes a bit browner rump there. With a very dark indigo and a slight purple iridescent sheen, and had a bicoloured bill with the upper mandible being chalky blue with a black tip, and the lower mandible actually having a red tip, as you kind of see there. And the plumage of the juveniles was actually unknown, but the bird's feet you also see is a dullish purplish red and unfeathered up to about the heel. And the iris is also, you can see there, a bit of a dark brown colour there. And sadly, the bird's voice was actually never recorded. However, after being extinct, they actually described it as having a beautiful rising and falling whistling call that was given from a roost site every evening. Kind of a low kind of crew sound, Would have been very interesting to hear these guys, but sadly we can't anymore. We'll have a look at the juvenile while we talk about their ecology and things. So not much is actually known about these pigeons. As it became extinct before a lot of people actually got a really good chance to observe them. It was likely these guys were a largely terrestrial species, feeding and nesting on the forest floor. And indigenous peoples of the town of Missoula said that the pigeon would roost in pairs or small groups of 3 to 4 in small shrubs or close to the ground. They also claimed it was very tame, which makes sense. Island tameness is quite common in these kind of species that live on islands. And allowing local hunters to actually pick them off its perch by hand. And they reported that they had stones in their gizzard. The species had stones in its gizzard. And they laid a single dark cream-coloured egg in an inline depression in the ground. And these eggs are quite small, actually, in proportion to the birds, being about 43 by 31 millimeters, or about 1.6 to 1.3 inches. So that's quite interesting as well. But in terms of its distribution and habitat, these guys were a non-migratory species and are thought to have lived in the forest floor that lived in lowland forests, including coastal swampy areas that liked mangroves. And they were usually considered to be endemic to the island of Console on the Solomon Islands off the coast of New Guinea, where the only specimens were collected. And the specimens being collected will likely come from Consuelo Bay in the northern part of the island, and the last reports of the species came from the Colabargarana River. And they were also reported on a couple islands as well, such as Saint Isabel and Melania, but also suspected may have once lived on Bougainville Island. However, this was never confirmed and may be considered anecdotal, but it is definitely possible. It would have been considered very unusual if they were truly endemic to this island, as the island hosts no other endemic species, and the pigeon was never linked ecologically with another species on the island. So it's likely that they would have lived in these other islands, but they likely just kind of went extinct there over time, potentially due to like rats and people, hunting them. So sadly, the last sightings of them, January 1904, 6 specimens and an egg were collected by Albert Stuart Mark, who was a bird collector for Lord Walter Rothschild near the Console Bay in Console. Then several local boys told him that they were present on nearby islands, and though he did not travel to these islands, he did actually search for these pigeons on the adjacent Bougainville Islands, but never really saw them. They were not searched for again briefly until 1927, and again in 1929, where 5 veteran collectors kind of began the Winteroo South Seas expedition that dedicated 3 months to try and find this pigeon across Consuelo with little success, which was really, really sad. The indigenous people interviewed them largely believed that the pigeon was extinct, and the last reported indigenous sighting was in the early 1940s, but that was never confirmed. Searches on the small cat-free Rob Roy Island and Wagner off the Consoles as well has been kind of shown, but they didn't discover any sign of the pigeons. And the lastest one was in 1974 with American scientist Jared Diamond actually not finding them at all as well. But in terms of their relationship to the people, they would have been a source of food for the local people who located it as roosting sites by either getting the bird to call or by its droppings, and then would have basically taken them as well. So that's part of the reason they most likely would have gone extinct. One indigenous person implied the gizzard stones of this pigeon may have had local value, and after the bird's extinction, they were occasionally confused with the arboreal crested cuckoo dove in modern folklore as well. So really didn't find too much about them as well, and they're actually on the flag of the Console province. But in terms of its extinction, it's believed they became extinct due to introduced predators like feral cats and feral dogs, as like a lot of these islands, they have no indigenous carnivorous mammals, so they would have been particularly susceptible to these species. And they existed on islands that they never reached. These cats never reached. Also, the clearing of forests would have led to their extinction. So that's quite sad there. And of several ornithologists that had visited this island, they kind of really found them, and it was likely that they were potentially already close to extinction in 1904. So sadly, they are likely to be quite extinct. People should go have a look. There's no harm in looking, but realistically, I think this is a great chance that the species is sadly extinct. But it's cool that we get to see someone make them in their game and give a chance to actually talk about them too. So yeah, really, really cool. So last but certainly not least, we've got a great cakes mod for today, and we're actually going to put this back because we're going to let them use it. So here we have got the Stella's sea eagle. So really, really cool species here. So is this the male or the female? Oh, that was a bit weird. Well, that's the male. Let's have a look at the female. No, I'll have a look at him because he's flying. Looks very interesting. Anyway, so we've got the Stella's sea eagle, or Halictus pelaginus, also known as the white-shouldered eagle or the Pacific sea eagle. So very, very interesting animal. It was first discovered by Peter Simons Pallas in 1811. And the species name comes from the name Pelagos, which means open sea or ocean. It was really described in the genus Aquila, and then Falco, and then George Robert Gray moved it to the genus Halictus in 1849. The Stella's sea eagle has been defined as designated the official name by the International Ornithologist Union, and is named after the German naturalist Georg Wilhelm Steller. If you know him, he discovered the Steller sea cow and things like that. It's also known as the Stella's fish eagle, Pacific sea eagle, or the white-shouldered eagle. In Russia, it is known as the Morskoy Orl, or the sea eagle. And it's got a few other names as well. But in 1996, there was actually looking into the genetics of the species. Where are you? There you go. I think we'll actually have a look at this one down here, because why not? I'm going to just move you over here. Oh no, that's not the one we wanted to move. They seem to be sitting in the corner. Let's get them out of the corner. I want to have a look at them in the light. Anyway, so they looked at the genetics, and they early diverged from the lineage that came with the bald eagle and white-tailed eagle about 3 or 4 million years ago. And all three of these species have yellow eyes, beaks, and talons, unlike their next closest relative, the Pallas fish eagle. So these guys are all pretty much considered, they're related to each other in the genus Halictus. They are the largest bird in their genus, and one of the largest raptors or largest species of bird of prey overall. Their females can weigh between 6.2 to 9.5 kilograms, or 14 to 21 pounds, while males are rather lighter and weigh between 4.9 to 6.8 kilograms, or between 11 to 15 pounds. The typical weight is variable, but it can depend on variation there. They've been reported to get as high as 7.75 kilograms, or 17 pounds, with a median weight of about 13 pounds, or about 6 kilograms as well, excluding expired eagles that have been poisoned. Its average weight, though, it does seem to outweigh the harpy, at being about 0.5 kilograms or a pound heavier on average than the Philippine eagle, by more than a kilo. The eagles, they also reach about 85 to 105 centimeters, or about 2'9" to 3'5" in length as well. And apparently males average about 89 centimeters, or just under 3 feet in length, with average females averaging about 100 centimeters, or about a meter in length, which is marginally shorter than harpy eagles. So they are heavier. It's just how they're built. They're built a little bit heavier, but they're not quite as the word is, but not quite as lean. They are a bit bulkier, but not quite as long, lanky. That's probably the better word for it. In terms of their wingspan, though, the wingspan would have been about 195 to 250 centimeters, between 6'5" and 8'5", which makes it the largest wingspan of pretty much any living eagle. with a median of about 7 feet. The absolute maximum wingspans have been recorded about 8'2". However, less substantial record in case they may have even greater wingspans. And there's some sources that suggest they could have had potentially a 9-foot wingspan. But if that's true, that would have considered, the largest any eagles. And you can see the unique amongst also eagles is they have yellow beaks even as juvenile birds, which is very interesting as well. And you can see our juvenile over there, wherever he's gone. I don't know where he's gone. Oh, there he is. We'll have a look at him later. But yeah, standard measurements. They've got relatively short tails and legs compared to them other species of large eagles, so a little bit smaller and bulkier. In terms of all the sea and fish eagles, they have short and stout toes. That is more comparable to like the booted eagles or the aquila or harpy eagles. All of these suggested that they are designed to catch fish rather than medium-sized mammals, although they clearly can eat them if they want. As in all fish and eagle species, as well as the majority of world's fish-eating raptors, these guys have spiracles, which are bumpy waves along the bottom of their feet that allow them to hold fish in their grasp. So very similar to that. And they would have very powerful talons as well, despite not having the bearing talons of a harpy. In one case, a wildlife veterinarian actually badly injured her arm when he grabbed her arm and impaled her with the talons and actually pierced through the other side of her arm. So yeah, that shows how strong that is. They've also got quite a large bill. And they have the largest bill potentially of any living eagle, just surpassing the Philippine eagle, and a similar robustness to the largest old world vultures like the condors. So that's kind of comparison there. But in terms of plumage, they're not extremely striking in terms of colours. They're mainly, as you can see, kind of black and white with a yellow beak. But they do have a mostly dark brown to black plumage with strongly contrasting colours. So you can see they've got like a little bit on their shoulders there, and on their tail feathers and bottom you can see they're a lot more white, but the most of their body they've got mostly black and a little bit of white on their kind of nose there. There is a rare dark morph that is sometimes considered a subspecies, but I don't know. It was considered a subspecies, but it's just considered a morph now. And you sometimes get like some with a little bit more white on them than others. There's just a little bit of variety there. In terms of the downy plumage of the young, let's have a look at the young there. Really, really cute. These guys have like silky white when hatching, but soon then turn to a brownish grey. And unlike with other sea eagles, their first year plumage is actually longer than the adults, and the juvenile plumage is usually a dark soot brown colour with an occasional grey-brown streaking, and the tails are also white with black mottling. But as they get older, that's when they kind of turn into their adult colours. Their adult plumage, they get them at about 4 to 5 years of age, which is interesting. And they do have a deep bracking cry, or a barking cry, and it's also quite similar in lots of regards to just missed that. Similar to kind of white-tailed eagles, but like a lot darker, or being a lot deeper. I mean, and during the displays in the breeding season, they've been known to make calls to each other like very deep-voiced gulls. So that's very interesting as well. In terms of their distribution, they do have they don't have a huge range, but they are quite interesting. So they are found, they breed on the Karpathy Peninsula, so from the coastal regions of the Sea of Okhotsk and the lower regions of the Amur River and down into Russia. They also will migrate to breeding grounds in Korea, Japan, and China in the winter, with most birds wintering south of their breeding range in the southern kind of Kuril Islands in Russia and also Hokkaido, Japan. And they are less prone to vagrancy as white-tailed eagles, and they lack the long-range dispersal typical of juveniles of that species. But vagrant eagles have been found in North America, such as the Aleutian Islands, the Polabov Islands, and the Kodiak Islands. There's also some individuals being seen in Texas, Nova Scotia, Maine, Massachusetts, and Newfoundland, and inland up to about Beijing in China and Yakutsk in Russia, and also as far south as Taiwan. So these are vagrant individuals, but then most population hangs around, the the eastern side, the western side of, or the Asian side of the Bering Sea in the North Pacific. So that's typically where you'll find them. This large body size is also suggest that the Steller sea eagle may actually be a glacial relic, which means it probably evolved in the narrower subarctic zone of the northeastern Asian coasts. With the shifted latitude, it would have been lower because of the ice age. They would have been colder and it would have brought them down. Um, and shifted latitudes according to ice age cycles. It never occurred really anywhere else though. The nests are built in large rocky outcrops or on the tops of tall trees, alongside rivers, large rivers with mature trees. Habitat like Arge, ermines, birches, and floodplains with alders, willows, and poplars are quite popular. Even though they nest on seacoast, they may not migrate, and the timing and duration of extent of their migrations may depend on things such as food availability and the conditions of the ice. On the Kamicha Peninsula, they overwinter in forest, river, and valleys near the coast, but are regularly distributed across the peninsula. Most wintering birds appear to be residential adults, and they do not migrate south in winter in rivers or wetlands in Japan, but occasionally move into mountainous inland areas along the seacoast. And the eagles' numbers perk on the Namiro Strait in late February in Hokkaido, Japan. They concentrate in coastal areas and kind of hang around there. And they tend to follow sea coasts when they're migrating and fly by themselves. And they can be found observing, at least 500, 200 meters apart. But on Kamicha, they mostly migration. Most migrants are birds in traditional plumage, and they have occasionally been seen flying over the ocean and perching in sea ice during winter. But it kind of mentioned as well the vagrancy of these guys. They have been reported in North America a few times. There was one named Stella that actually was been flying around for a couple years around the place, so that's quite interesting. But yeah, we'll get on to other aspects of their anatomy and stuff. So in terms of their diet, they mainly feed on fish, and they are apex predators of their environment. They prefer eating salmon or trout, and among these they like pink salmon or churm salmon, but they will also eat grayling and three-springed stickleback. And they get average about 2.2 to 5 kilograms in mass. They are not. They will also eat prey up to about 6 to 7 kilograms, or about 13 to 15 pounds. So basically, stuff in their size range. Though in coastal areas, they may also feed on Bering wolffish and lumpfish and other different species as well. And like most other species of sea eagles or fish eagles, they will hunt almost exclusively in shallow water. With relatively large numbers of these normally solitary birds can be seen congregating in spawning areas in August through September. On the Kamicha Peninsula, as many as aggregations of up to 700 eagles have been reported, though they can be found in smaller groups. And they typically will do this because there's the salmon are going up, in the summer to spawn, so there'll be things as well. And in Hokkaido, they actually are attracted to the Pacific cod that are quite common there, and Alaskan pollock as well. It's actually quite important for the populations in Japan. Fish makes up about 80% of their diet, but they'll also eat water birds quite a bit as well. They'll often eat ducks, geese, swans, cranes, herons, and gulls. They actually have a strong local preference for the salty black gull. Moors are also quite an important part of their diet. They'll also eat auklets and kittiwakes and also pelagic cormorants. They'll be quite common in terms of their bird food. In Russia, they'll also eat capercaillies, grouse, and rock ptarmigans. On other land birds, they've been observed hunting as snowy owls, carrion crows, common crows, short-eared owls, snowy owls, and actually some smaller passerines as well. And even in one case, they were actually observed feeding on a great albatross, which was actually a rare vagrant from the subantarctic oceans. So that's interesting as well. But they may also kind of supplement their diets with various mammals, crabs, mussels, worms, and squid when get the opportunity. And they have been reported eating mammals. So mammalian carnivores appear to be readily hunted. They'll also eat sables, American mink, Arctic fox, red foxes, small domestic dogs, even, and smaller species like voles have been recorded, tundra voles, and they will also eat carrions. They will scavenge on larger carcasses as well. And they've also been seen preying on young seals, both as carrion and, actually eating young seals. And they kind of carry them off. If they're at least if they're under 9 kilograms, they can actually lift them off. So, and fly off with them, which is interesting as well. And they most commonly will hunt from a perch. So they'll sit on a tree or a perch or a rocky ledge that's about 35 to 30 meters above the water. And although they may hunt on the wing as well, they usually will circle about 6 to 7 meters above the water. Once they've catted their prey, they will go out and dive and kind of, go and grab them from the water. And they're also called what's calyptoparasites. So the adults will benefit most out of this behavior as they're able to steal food from smaller birds or younger birds, because they can believe that saves them the energy of hunting. And the bold coloration of adults may actually be an important signal for these feeding groups as well. So, kind of the say, hey, don't mess with me. And outside the breeding period, they will roost communally as well. When salmon and trout are dying in the winter and after their summer spawning, they often be seen with golden eagles and white-tailed eagles to exploit this food source as well. And occasionally there may be smaller species of eagle to try and steal a fish from the stellars, but often they will lose in a face-off. But sometimes both juvenile adults may lose the fish to the smaller species, even face-to-face, because they're not quite as aggressive. One video shows a golden eagle actually engaging a mature Stellar's eagle and ultimately displacing it after maintaining a superior grip as well. So that's quite interesting. In terms of their breeding, though, the eagle kind of builds several bulky eyries or big nests, very similar to other species of eagle that can be up to about 1.5 meters in diameter and about 2.5 meters, a height of 1.5 meters and a width of 2.5 meters with diameter. They usually place it in nests on high-on trees or rocky outcrops that can be about 15 to 20 meters above the ground, and sometimes in trees up to about 45 meters above the ground. And alternate nests are usually built within 900 meters of each other. In one case, 2 active nests have been found to be located within 100 meters of each other. So courtship for these guys begins about February and March, and they will soar, flight around the breeding area. They believe that pairs of eagles will remain constant throughout their lives. However, the results of molecular genetics show that some chicks have relatively high similarity to chicks of other nests, so they may have occasional polygamy or in colonial nesting birds. Though alternate hypotheses may actually be such as parents of conditional siblings where close relatives exist. So it may be just, they're related to each other as, they're siblings or something. But, they may be, stepping out a little bit as well. They tend to copulate the nest after building it, and then they'll lay their first greenish-white egg in April or May. And these eggs will range about 78 to 85 millimeters, or about 3.1 to 3.3 inches in height, and about 57 to 64 millimeters, or about 2.2 to 2.5 inches in width, and they weigh about 160 grams, or about 5 ounces, being slightly larger than those of the harpy eagle. And clutches can consist of 1 to 3 eggs, with 2 being the average, but usually only 1 chick survives adulthood, and in some cases many as 3 will successfully fledge, in good conditions. After an incubation period of about 3.9 to 4.5 days, the chicks hatch, and they're quite attritional, so they're not able to fly out of the nest, and they're covered in whitey down, and the eaglets will fledge again in August and September, and the adult plumage is attained after 4 years. They do not typically occur, but the first breeding does not occur for about a year or two after that. In terms of their nestlings, so small nestlings can actually become prey to other arboreal mammals, so some arboreal mammals like sables and ermines, and also birds like corvids. Many of these small clever predators rely on distraction and stealth to prey on the eagle's nest and are killed. Basically, if the parents find them, they will be killed. And once they reach roughly adult size, few predators can actually threaten the species. Though in one case, a brown bear was able to access a nest located in a rock formation and ate the eagle, fledgling eaglet, but this is believed to be an exception. Excluding the Asian black bear, they have not thus been recorded as a predator. No other mammalian carnivores, greater or equal to their size, can climb trees in the species range. But due primarily to egg predation nest collapse, only about 45 to 67% of eggs are actually successful. Reach adulthood, up to 25% of nestlings may be lost. But once fully grown, they basically have no natural predators. But in terms of their conservation status, they are sadly considered vulnerable. So they are legally protected and actually considered a national predator in Japan and mostly occur in protected areas along Russia. But many threats do threaten the species. Things such as habitat alteration, industrial pollution, and overfishing, and in turn that all decreases the fish that they eat, which means less food for the eagles. The current population is thought to be about 5,000 and is considered to be decreasing, sadly, with heavy flooding, which also could be a fact of climate change, caused almost complete nesting failure for the eagles nesting in Russian rivers, due to completely hampering the ability for the parents to catch the fish essential for their survival. Prosecution of the bird in Russia continues as well, as due to the habit of stealing fur bearers from trappers. So they steal kind of steal the fur. Persecution of the bird continues as well, but due to a lack of other available prey in some areas, some have actually started to move inland and scavenge on carcasses left by hunters. And that exposes the risk of lead poisoning because, often lead bullets are lead and they will eat the lead shot and become poisoned. In the Kampuchea, about 320 pairs are reported and another 89 pairs are monitored. The largest kind of populations about 2,000 pairs in like the Immortal Islands and stuff like that. And another 2,000 occur on Hokkaido, Japan. And generally, the species outlook is favourable, though. Outside of its breeding range, food bases and primarily wind areas are so far secure. So, just a little bit extra help, and they could be doing quite well. They're probably never a very common species as well, just because they're so big. And we mentioned they may be a glacial relic. They may be a lot more common during the Ice Age, when the world was a little bit cooler. But yeah, still a wonderful species, and we don't want to go extinct. So that's another great mod done by Great Cakes. Always a winner. So yeah, really awesome eagle. I love seeing more eagles, and I have heard there is a Haas eagle in the works, so I'll be very excited to cover that. But yeah, I think this is a very, very great place to end the video. So yeah, thank you, Sky Polaris. Thank you for all your crocodiles and big cats. You've done a really good job with those. Thank you, Monsoon. You did a really good job with your going a pigeon. I really love seeing the pigeon. I like to see it climb around and things. That was really cool. And, of course, Great Cakes mod, you've got to make the winner with your eagles, because it's always good to see some really amazing mods coming from Great Cakes, and, that eagle deserved. It's nice to see eagles and other birds coming to the game. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.